Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today we're going to continue talking about disco music. Okay, some of you may be too young to know what disco was, but disco lives on in modern club music because, of course, they owe a lot. The club scene owes a lot to what disco did back in the 1970s, especially coming from New York. And that's kind of what we talked about last time, the origins of disco music.
Yeah, the origins of the music, how it started out kind of in obscurity, and then, wow, it just shot to the top of the U.S. charts. People became more aware of it, and it was loved for quite a while, and then, wow, people started making fun of it. You were uncool if you were listening to it or dancing to it, but it kind of laid the foundation for future music at nightclubs especially because there hadn't been any kind of club music to that point. So we can thank disco for current club music. If you're a clubber, as we call you, if you like to go to nightclubs and dance, then you probably know about disco already and maybe some of the history. We're going to continue talking about the history behind it. It's kind of interesting. A lot of the history, of course, was taking place in New York City, where things were a little wild, to say the least. We're going to get started by reading through day 2. Stay tuned.
By the mid-1970s, a number of wildly hedonistic nightclubs were at the forefront of disco music. Bringing together dancers of different races, cultures, and sexualities, they allowed disco music and disco music producers to flourish. I remember I was in the bathroom of one club, and on either side of me were 3 men dressed as Diana Ross, remembers Nile Rodgers. That's where I got the idea for the Diana Ross song, I'm Coming Out. Arguably, the most successful disco club was Studio 54. Stories of its outrageous parties and the A-list celebrities who attended them made it the city's most exclusive venue. The more exclusive it became, the more people would gather outside its doors every night, desperate to get in. In fact, one rejected partygoer even fell to his death while trying to climb into the club through an open window. Studio 54's reputation enabled it to survive numerous clashes with the police. Nonetheless, as disco achieved mainstream popularity in the late 1970s, its quality deteriorated. Commercial disco hits flooded the U.S. top 40 charts, much to the irritation of rock music fans. What's more, the genre's racial and sexual diversity was resented by people in many parts of U.S. society. Tension escalated until the summer of 1979 when a baseball stadium in Chicago hosted Disco Demolition Night, an event at which rock fans used explosives to destroy thousands of disco records. Disco vanished from the charts shortly afterward. Though many lament that what happened in Chicago was the night disco died, the genre never really went away. Disco's funky bass lines and elaborate melodies are a staple of dance and pop music hits, Dua Lipa's Don't Start Now and Lady Gaga's Rain on Me being 2 notable examples. Ultimately, like it or not, the party never ended for disco.
Okay, guys, how disco set the tempo for modern music. It's day 2. We're going to talk more about the history outside the music. So this is more about culture and what was going on at the time. So by the mid-1970s, that would be 1975, a number of wildly hedonistic nightclubs were at the forefront of disco music. Okay, so if you're talking about wild hedonistic nightclubs, wow, you're talking about nightclubs where there are a lot of crazy things going on. First of all, I can tell you there were a lot of drugs, illegal drugs that were being taken at that point in time. People were free to do and say and be whatever they wanted to do and say and be. It was more like, I think, the 2000s and afterwards than it was the 70s when things were more conservative in other parts of the country, but not in New York City. So if it's hedonistic, it just means people there are more concerned with pleasuring themselves and having, some sort of sensual pleasure, sexual pleasure even. That takes primary importance in their lives. So there are some crazy things going on. If you talk about the forefront of anything, not just disco music, it just means that was something that was the most important thing happening at that point in time. And those nightclubs became quite shockingly newsworthy all around the United States. People were really shocked at what was going on in New York City.
Yeah, they were just there for their own pleasure, and I don't suppose they were, studying during the day to have good careers and stuff like that. They were just having fun. I think they also described the hippies in the 1960s as having hedonistic lifestyles. They were just all about pleasure and doing drugs. And a lot of people would say they were just being irresponsible or whatever. And I guess they said the same thing about people in discos. They were leading these hedonistic lifestyles with drugs and sex and dancing and fun and stuff like that. And of course, these nightclubs were at the forefront of disco music. That's where it was all happening. If you liked disco music, you wanted to go to a discotheque, get inside and dance and, have some drinks yourself and have a good time. Now, bringing together dancers of different races, cultures, and sexualities, they allowed disco music and disco music producers to flourish. So it was a big mix. They had dancers of different races. You had black people, you had Hispanics, you had white people, you had all sorts of people in there dancing away. We had different cultures getting involved. And also sexualities, which would be, I guess, your sexual preference. Are you straight or are you gay or are you bi or whatever? Yeah, they were all getting together. And of course, all those things combined together allowed disco music and the producers to flourish. And here we've got the verb to flourish, which means basically to grow. You get to do what you want to do, and you get to move forward, and you're quite successful.
Yeah, and you're growing in a really vigorous way, usually because of the environment you're in. If you have a greenhouse and you're growing plants, they tend to flourish in a greenhouse. There's lots of sun and warmth, and they do very well. Or if you're a student and you love your major, or maybe you love your teacher that year, you tend to flourish and do very well. You're very successful. So here's a quote from Nile Rodgers. Remember, he was part of the group called Chic. Right? So he has this memory from those days. He said, I remember I was in a bathroom of one club. Some bad things were going on in those bathrooms, I must say. And he says on either side of me were three men who were all dressed as Diana Ross, who's a very popular singer. She's a beautiful black woman. If you've seen her sing, you know that she's quite glamorous, has a lot of big hair, and she always has beautiful dresses. He says, that's where I got the idea for the Diana Ross song, I'm Coming Out. So you know that if you're homosexual or gay and you want to announce that to your friends and family, we use that phrase to come out. Oh, he came out to his friends and family last year. So this song, I'm Coming Out, suddenly became kind of an anthem or a song for the gay community back then. And they also adopted Diana Ross as kind of their hero of the time. And she's still someone that the gay community follow. She's very popular with them in particular. She has I don't think she produces or sings too much anymore, but she had some great songs.
Yeah, she used to be Diana Ross in the Supremes or something. And then later she sang a lot of disco songs, of course.
She went solo.
Indeed, and she was quite successful with that. But here in the next paragraph it says, arguably the most successful disco club was Studio 54. And yes, when they talked about disco, they were indeed talking about what was happening at Studio 54, which I believe was on 54th Street in New York City there. And I think my brother had an album called A Night at Studio 54, which had a whole bunch of disco hits on it, and stories of its outrageous parties and the A-list celebrities who attended them made it the city's most exclusive venue. It was the place that you had to be in New York City. There were other discotheques in New York, but hey, this was the granddaddy of them all. This was the place that you wanted to go because it had lots of celebrities going there. Famous people were going there. They were A-list celebrities, people in Hollywood movies and stuff like that. And they had outrageous parties. And here we've got outrageous, which means over the line, just going really, really far, more than you would expect. They were doing really wild things. You would be really shocked if you were from Kansas and you went to one of those parties. It would have just blown your mind away.
Yeah, so outrageous can mean shockingly bad, really excessive in whatever you're doing. Maybe somebody has an idea for a New Year party or a Christmas party, and it's kind of shocking. You say, oh, that's an outrageous suggestion. So you can use that word. It's kind of fun. So a venue is just a particular location for something. Maybe you're looking for a venue for your wedding. You don't know where you want your wedding to take place. Well, the venue is a place where it will happen. It's usually a place where there's an organized event. Could be a concert, a conference, a sports event, or a wedding. We're going to talk more about Studio 54 and how outrageous it was, but first we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
大家好，我是 Patrick 老师，欢迎回到 Unit9 第二天的课程。我们在昨天了解到70年代兴起、70年代末期陨落的 disco 音乐，当时到底是由于什么样的时代背景兴起？因为什么样子的因素让它受到许多人的欢迎？今天我们会继续的往下看，去了解到为什么 disco 音乐后来没落了。好的，我们先进入第一段。第一段在这里依然维持告诉我们 disco 音乐当时盛行的情况如何。许多夜店都会播放 disco 的音乐，其中最有名的代表就是第二段所介绍的 Studio 54。好的，在这里我们先进一步的来看一下这两段有哪一些特别需要注意的单字和片语呢？首先，第一段的第二句 Bringing together dancers of different races, cultures, and sexualities, they allow disco music and disco music producers to flourish。 这里有个句型，分词构句，要请同学特别关注 bringing 和这个 they， 基本上这两个子句主词是一样的。 Bringing together dancers of different races 是谁 bring together dancers of different races 让不同种族的舞者聚集在一起呢？当然是 they， 而这个 they 所指称的是谁？要再往前看，我们就发现原来是前面A number of wildly hedonistic nightclubs， 就是崇尚享乐主义的夜店。好的，这是分词构句。接下来这一段还有一个单字要特别注意，就是 flourish。flourish 跟我们第一天所看到的 thrive 那个字都是繁荣发展的意思，都是表示发展的相当蓬勃。好的，第二段有一个字，请同学特别注意到。我们了解到 Studio 54可以说是 disco 夜店的代表。Studio 54为什么会受欢迎？因为这边所办的派对非常的疯狂，而且还有很多一线的明星会参加。这个句子里有一个字 exclusive venue， 这个 exclusive 请大家特别注意。所谓的 exclusive 等于它是排除了某些人，只有一些人限定的对象才可以参加。因此我们可以了解，由于这家夜店 他的派对很疯狂，又有一线明星参观这个夜店，在这个夜店当中出没，所以这个夜店变成有很多人不得其门而入。Exclusive 有服务对象、有所限定的意思。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue talking about the most successful disco club, which was arguably the most successful disco club. It could be said that it was. That's Studio 54. It had outrageous parties. A-list celebrities would go to those parties. And, of course, lots of people would want to go there. It was exclusive, though. You had to be somebody famous or you had to have some connections to get in there. And the more exclusive it became, the more people would gather outside its doors every night, desperate to get in. So here we've got this the more pattern. The more exclusive it was, the more people who wanted to go inside. It kind of built on itself. It was getting more exclusive, and more people were waiting outside, desperate to get in. They really wanted to get in as if their life depended on it.
It's kind of sad. Even today, there are nightclubs where you have to be somebody, either a celebrity or have a lot of money for the bouncer. Those are those big guys that protect the door. Before they'll let you in, you have to be somebody. Even today, well, in fact, it says back then there was one rejected party goer, someone who tried to get in but was rejected. I guess he wasn't cool enough or rich enough. He fell to his death trying to climb into the club through an open window. So sad. Some people get a little bit crazy over some of these things they want so badly. They're desperate. So here it says Studio 54's reputation enabled it to survive numerous clashes with the police. I'm sure the police at some point just gave up trying to, keep people, obeying the law. There was so much illegal activity going on in the club, especially with the drugs, public sex. It was really bad. So if you have a clash with someone, it can mean that you have a violent argument where you start hitting each other. It could be a disagreement at work where you're just, saying, I don't agree with your viewpoint or your opinion. I think you're wrong. That could be a clash. Sometimes it's just kind of a silent clash. Sometimes we'll say, yeah, we don't really get along. I think our personalities clash. Sometimes your personality is very different from somebody else's, and you're just not comfortable being around them. That would be a clash. And also, for you fashionistas and fashionistas out there, actually, we just say fashionistas. If you're into fashion and you have different patterns or colors that don't go together, don't match, we'll often say, his shirt and his pants clash, or her shirt and her skirt clash. They don't really go together.
Interesting, we're using the word clash here because there was a British punk band that got to be famous around this time called The Clash. You may have heard of them. They certainly weren't disco music, but let's stick to disco music here. Yes, indeed, there were lots of clashes with the police, lots of conflicts, but because the place was famous, they kind of got away with that stuff. Nonetheless, as disco achieved mainstream popularity in the late 1970s, its quality deteriorated. So, yeah, it became popular in the mainstream, which means society at large, okay? You had all these disco hits on the radio, and everybody else was trying to cash in and make disco songs. So, yeah, it kind of made everything seem kind of cheap at that point because so many people were trying to get into the game. And yes, the quality went down. It deteriorated.
It got worse and worse over time. So commercial disco hits flooded the U.S. top 40 charts. We have the top 40. much to the irritation of rock music fans. Oh, they hated disco. They never liked it. So if someone's irritated, you talk about that state of feeling annoyed and impatient, angry, just kind of frustrated at everything that's going on as being a state of irritation. Yeah. So much to the irritation of rock music fans. Or you could just say, irritating many of the rock music fans at that time. They hated it. So what's more, the genre's racial and sexual diversity was resented by people in many parts of the U.S. society. They thought it was outrageous what they were seeing in some of these nightclubs, especially Studio 54, which became really famous. People were writing articles about it. So people, in just, the farmlands of the U.S., they thought it was crazy and horrible, immoral, what these people were doing. If you resent something, you really are upset about something that's taking place. So it could be that you're bitter about it, or you feel that something is just wrong. If it's immoral, they might feel indignation or indignant because it's going on. They just think it's terrible. You could resent the fact that maybe your boss seems to favor someone in the office more than you. That would be you resenting something.
Yeah, I resent being called irresponsible, for example, when I work so hard. And tension escalated until the summer of 1979 when a baseball stadium in Chicago hosted Disco Demolition Night. I don't know if that was at Wrigley Field or Comiskey Park, but in any case, the tension was getting higher and higher, the people hating each other. So at a baseball field in Chicago, there was Disco Demolition Night, and that was an event at which rock fans, people who like, music with guitars and basses and drums and stuff, they used explosives like dynamite to destroy thousands of disco records. Yeah, I think they did that in the baseball field with all those records out there, blowing them up, and disco vanished from the charts shortly afterward. I don't think it was as a result of that event in Chicago, but yeah, disco was dying pretty fast there, and I remember that time. It seemed like one day disco was popular, and the next, hey, where'd disco go? I thought disco was popular. It's disappeared. It's gone.
Yeah, or if they started playing a disco song at a dance, people might start booing. Yeah, it became unpopular quickly. When you talk about explosives, you're talking about materials that will blow up. Materials that are used to make a bomb, like dynamite. That's one of those things. So, though many lament that what happened in Chicago was the night disco died, the genre never really went away. That's kind of true. At least the musical style was adopted somewhat into other styles. If you lament something, it just means you're sad that something has taken place. Disco's funky bass lines and elaborate melodies are a staple or something that's a regular part of dance and pop music hits. And here are two examples. Dua Lipa's Don't Start Now, that's her song, and then Lady Gaga's Rain on Me, being two notable examples. If something's notable, just means it's something that you want to talk about. It's something that's worth your attention or worth your notice. You could also say remarkable. So there are two notable examples. They're good examples of what we just said, that there are parts or elements of disco that you can hear in those two pieces or two songs.
That's right. So if you want to hear a modern version of disco music, you can check out these two hits. And I'm sure they've posted their videos on YouTube there, so check them out. They are notable examples, but there probably are other examples of modern disco songs. And ultimately, or in the end, like it or not, the party never ended for disco. So yeah, it stopped being popular in the mainstream in the late 70s there. It came back here and there. I think there was a song called Funky Town that came out in the early 80s. People were going, what? That sounds like a disco song. Disco's back? Oh no! But that was a fun song anyway. And yeah, it kind of went underground, and it kept going there. I mean, people still liked it. There were still homosexuals that wanted this kind of music and stuff. So it lived on, and it's still going strong in some places. So yeah, it never ended, and it's still around. And yeah, you can find disco songs online all the time, like Donna Summer songs or the Bee Gees
songs,
or the Tramps or the Spinners. Yeah, there are all sorts of disco bands that were popular then, and their songs are still online, so check them out. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
我们继续看到第二段有一个句型，请特别注意。The more exclusive it became, the more people would gather outside its doors every night, desperate to get in. 好，这个句子其实有两个句型可以解说。第一个句型就是 the more, 越怎么样。首先，我们先弄清楚第一个子句 the more exclusive it became， 这个 it 所代替的就是前面的 Studio 54。这家夜店它变得对服务的对象、开放的对象越有所限制。The more people would gather outside its doors every night， 越多人徘徊在门口，想要参观，想要进入。这是第一个句型。第二个句型 desperate to get in， 这里的 desperate to get in 呢，它也是一样省略了前面到底是谁想要 desperate to get in， 谁迫不及待的想要进去呢？就是 people were desperate to get in。 好的，接下来我们看到下面第三段我们了解到是 Studio 54， 它虽然因为声名远播，所以让自己可以顺利的度过许多的危机。我们看 Studio 54's reputation enabled it to survive numerous clashes。 这里的 survive 就是在什么困难当中存活下来，是一个很重要的单字。我们看一个 survive 的例句，发生空难了。照道理来说，很多人在空难当中可能丧生，可是奇迹发生了。Miraculously, all the passengers survived the crash. 所有的旅客都没有在这场空难当中丧生。They survived the crash. 好的，在第三段，我们看到 disco 走下坡了，有两个因素。第一个因素呢 ，its quality deteriorated， 它的素质下降了。Deteriorate 就是 go from bad to worse. Its quality deteriorated. 除了内在因素，还有外部因素。The genre's racial and sexual diversity was resented by people in many parts of U.S. society. 由于 disco 在种族还有性别文化方面相当的多元，受到很多保守人士的反对，因此 disco 慢慢走下坡。再来最后一段，请同学特别看到，同样是稍早老师所强调的分词构句的句型，我们在最后一句 Disco's funky bass lines and elaborate melodies are a staple of dance and pop music hits. Dua Lipa's Don't Start Now and Lady Gaga's Rain on Me being two notable examples. 请同学把 being 圈起来。由于呢，这一个子句的主词是 Dua Lipa's还有 Lady Gaga's 他们的专辑，和前面的 Disco's funky bass lines 它主词不一样，所以请同学要注意哦。这里主词 Dua Lipa's 他们是必须要保留，是不能省略的。以上是我们今天第二天的讲解，谢谢大家，拜拜。
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And hey, go down to your local disco and boogie down. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.